And our first talk for the day is the Drummond Rennie lecture. Drummond is a legend. He was the one who spearheaded the launch of the peer review conferences. And he's very delighted to see that we have selected Anna Marusic to talk to us about forward to the past, making contributors accountable. I think everyone knows Anna. She is an amazing scientist with major contributions to peer review and research integrity. She has been at these meetings making very important contributions throughout the years. She's at the University of Split, has served as editor-in-chief in the Croatian Medical Journal and the Journal of Global Health. She has another journal currently, an overlay journal at the University of Split. She's on the advisory board of the Equator Network. I can speak for an hour and take her time, so I'm not going to do that. Anna, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It is really an honor and privilege to give this Drummond Rennie talk, and what best way to honor the legend, but talk about authorship. I think that's very important. So this is my first slide is about declarations of activities and relationship, conflict of interest. And I think that the most important relationship for me with regard to this presentation is that I attended my first peer review conference in Prague in 1997 when Drummond published the paper that this talk is all about, when we started thinking more deeply about authorship. This was his paper on authorship and the need and proposal to make contributors accountable. And as you see, he proposed that authorship is not only about names, but it's also about accountability for the work and guaranteeing that the work is of integrity. Why 1997? I'm just going to a little bit go in the history, and I'm going to try to pack a lot of information in the past almost 30 years to this day. So some of my slides are going to be busy. I'm not going to go into detail, but just want to provide an overview of what happened with the research on authorship and what we know about authorship now and where we could go, what are some recommendations. And why we started talking about authorship, because through history, a lot of this has changed. If you remember, the first journal was published in 1665, and it had one author, like this example. And then this was the first record in PubMed in 2001, when there were 743 authors. If you look at the title, it's because it was high energy particle physics. And that was the time where we realized that, you know, there was a proliferation of the numbers of authors. And when you look at physics paper today, the number of authors can go up to 5,000. And the latest one that I took had 2,886 authors and 230 affiliations. So how do you allocate responsibility and accountability to that many authors? So what I'm going to do in this lecture, I'm going first to cover very briefly what we have as standard problems in authorship, and then I'm going to look at some new or old and new and coming problems and how we can address that. So overall problems that I have to cite our systematic review many years ago, where we looked into problems in authorship, and in a meta-analysis, we show that about 30% of people say that they had problems in authorship. If you ask smaller journal, that goes up to 50%. Also, a recent systematic review looked more deeply into the qualitative aspects of ethics in authorship. Also, honorary authors have been and are a current issue. If you look at recent meta-analysis, we see that still a lot of researchers say that they have seen honorary authorship and that they automatically put their head of department as an author. So this is a problem. Then again, we have gender disparities in authorship, which was a long time problem and is a problem that is current today, although we see some improvements. So this was a study in 5 leading medical journals over 10 years time that show that still we have the gender gap, although this gap has decreased, and different rates depending on geography and authors' positions. Also, we have geographical disparities. I come from what is called a scientific periphery, from a very small scientific community, and we do have problems in dealing with authorship, and that's why we have more problems with authorship. Again, in the same set of journals, it has been shown that there is Anglo-Saxon dominance, although this has decreased in the recent years. So it would be useful to look at what's happening. Then again, we have equal or shared authorship that has been increasing over time. Now you can have 3 or 4 or 5, and I have, as editor, seen papers where all of the authors want to be first authors. So this is problematic, and a study, as you see here, show that a lot of people have had equal authorship, but about 30, for almost 40% think that this is not an ethical approach to authorship. So there are solutions, and people have proposed that shared authorship should be clearly indicated in the CV. The journal should have a policy how to deal with it and clearly indicate the contributions of these equal authorship. This was the COPE statement, and also that clarification of individuals, of the degree of individuals' contribution should be published too. Then again, we also have increasing participation of the public, the community, for example, research with indigenous populations, citizen science. So how to deal with that? And there are studies that show that there are different ways and very many inconsistencies in how they are rewarded and acknowledged for their contributions. And if you look, for example, in systematic reviews in health, then the role and the contributions of patients is described in different ways and acknowledged in many different ways. So the suggestions from research are that the acknowledgement section should be replaced by, clear descriptions of the contributions, that perhaps if they are non-scientists, if they are community in general, they should be a group author, or that there should be an agreement before the research with clear roles, and then later an acknowledgement if appropriate and as appropriate. Then we have anonymous authors. We usually don't think about that. You have editorials that are signed by the editorial team. And as you see in this graph, or the blue graphs, the blue graph is the number of anonymous papers with anonymous authors, and the orange line is the percentage of them. You see that they are decreasing, but we also see that, especially now for political reasons, people want to remain anonymous on papers. So how to deal with that? And the co-position is that sometimes editors can accept anonymous authors, but it has to be exceptional situations, and even pseudonym can be permissible. So this is something that I think we're going to deal and is increasing today. Then group authorship. We know from peer review research from this conference from long ago that there are inconsistencies in how group authorship is presented. And again, from the group, from Muhammad Hosseini, who is here, they show that group authorship has ethical challenges about credit, accountability. It has legal challenges. What about copyright? And then technical challenges, how to deal with it and how to work on that properly. So what they say is that we should develop a system, maybe a ORCID number for the group, and then link everything, researchers, the work they do, and the DOI of the publication that they publish, so that this credit for the publication is properly identified in group authorship. Then we have AI as an author, and we're going to have sessions on AI. We all know that 2023, we had papers published already by mid-January, with AI or ChatGPT as an co-author, and already it was corrected, as you see here on this slide. I think this is going to be an ongoing problem, and I cannot give any solutions. But what the current position of the majority of the journals is that AI cannot be an editor. But we have different types of guidance, like a very recent work from STM about generative AI. Then we have also researchers thinking about attribution and declaring the use of AI. And again, more philosophical aspects of, can an AI be an author? What about I don't know, the artwork that is created by AI, and there have been legal disputes with different resolutions. So I think this is something that we're going to work on a lot. Then what is also interesting is that over the years, and this is a very good example published by Sabine Alam from Taylor and Francis, of what they have been seeing as problems in publishing integrity. And as you see here, all kinds of authorship was, prevalent in 2017. But then with paper mill activity, you see selling and buying of authorship, fake journals, fake editors, fake acceptance letters, compromised stakeholders in publishing. So we also have to think about fake authors. And there are examples, you can read it either in published literature or also on Retraction Watch, that people use your name as an author in completely false paper. So what are the solutions? United to Act is a group of publishers and other stakeholders that are thinking about how to address paper mills, and they say we have to have trust markers, maybe ORCID. But again, everybody can make an ORCID. It has to be validated. For example, I don't know how my school can validate ORCID, and I couldn't validate my ORCID, for example. So we still have a lot of work to do. And we have to know, for example, it was just a paper or news in Nature from last week, where uptake of ORCID is about 90% in medicine, but it is about 20-something% in social sciences and 14% in humanities. So we cannot think that ORCID is a solution to everything. And STM has just recently, I think in May, again published a guidance for publishers how to deal with paper mills and trust, and how to ensure that the people who are submitting papers are true authors. We also have a problem of institutions and authors in a way, and their accountability. We also have a problem of these octopus affiliations or fake affiliations, and there have been cases where universities buy people's affiliations. They buy them so that they put their affiliation in order to increase the position of the university at the ranking scales. So it's important. This study from Vivian Bachelet from Chile says that, as you see, almost 40% of affiliation at their universities could not be verified. At only 14% of the people from these universities had ORCID. So it's a big problem. Again, we have to have trust markers, and what has been suggested is maybe, again, a DOI or ORCID for institutions like this repository or registry of research organizations, ROR. Then again, but with these contributions, we would like to see, and what has stemmed from the work of Rennie is that we declare contributions, and this is now the credit taxonomy. You can have this like a matrix where you show who did what, and also you can declare the degree of contribution, but I haven't found research on that aspect, which I think is very important. I'm going to show it on a next slide. And as you see, when you look at these contributions, most of the contributions are about writing and about analysis and the research. But from my personal perspective, I think that actually people are always going to lie about what they contribute. And I have to go back to the research that we did a long time ago. We were recently at a meta research conference, and they said, oh, we have to do more randomized trials in meta research. And I remember BMJ papers on peer review, and we also did some randomized trial in authorship. So we first looked at the time when we started, after Drummond introduced the concept of contributorship, we looked at how different journals that had different systems in declaring contributorship, and the way, and what we found is depending on the way you ask, you will get either more or less honorary authors. So this was our first finding. And then we decided, okay, let's do a study in our journal. We do a randomized trial. We'll send different types of contribution declaration. You just write it yourself, you tick off from a list, or you say to qualify, you have to tick 2 from below. At least 2 from below. And we found that depending on the way how you ask, you get different answers, which means actually that, you know, as a psychometric instrument, this is not a good way to really truly know who did what. Then again, we did a reliability test. So we sent the same people the same questionnaire about their contributions at 2 different times, about 2 weeks difference, and they reported back different things. So that means that this system is not reliable, okay? Then we asked them, okay, don't use a binary system, let's use a scale. Tell me what you did from a scale from 1 to 5. And we showed then that if you ask people on a scale, then they are more honest, and you get an increase in deserving authors if you write them on a scale. I didn't do statistics, but if you ask him, did I contribute? I would say yes, maybe 3 out of 5, because I did some simple statistics, and then other people, you know, did the real thing, the statisticians. Also, when you ask on a scale and you ask about what you did and what other people did, everything is in the eye of the beholder, and people value much more what they did than what they perceive the others did. And then finally, and Mario is here who is going to talk about it, we did a study where we just asked people, okay, tell us why you deserve to be an author on this paper. And we saw that if you have a small number of authors, they are, you know, they don't know why you're asking them because they are the authors. Only this need to justify the contributions increases with the increasing number of the people. And our conclusion, the recommendation was just ask people, and then it's in the open, and then the community can make a judgment. And we also did a study in clinical, for clinical trials, because there you have doctors who may not contribute to everything. And then we said, okay, you have to think of authorship as a part of your clinical trial protocol. It has to be in a protocol, it has to be followed up, and that's the only way how you're going to get a deserving author in the end after final discussion. And I would like to draw your attention to a white paper that is going to be published in meta-archive very soon from the National Academies, where a group of us worked on accountability and credit for authorship. And what they recommended is that we have to think of authorship in a broader sense, in a framework of integrity, that is transparency, credit, and accountability, that these decisions have to be made throughout research and not at the end when the paper is written and ready to be submitted, and also that the description of contributions should be done in a way that is both human and machine readable, so that we can deal with it and check it in a proper way, so that we have these trust markers. And they also said that everybody has to be included, okay, research organizations are the ones that have to deal with everything, to have to train, to have to provide guidance, that they have a fair process of allocating credit, and also that they have to look at authorship not as a single name, but really a contribution and a greater picture, but also journals and research funders and scholarly articles too. And I will finish with this slide instead of a conclusion to say that we need more research. We have been doing this for more than almost 30 years, but we need to continue to work on authorship, because it is the answers, as they say, the currency of authorship. And we usually think, okay, authorship, it's between the researcher and the journal, but it's not. It should go back to the community, to the organization, and we have to change the climate and culture. We did a systematic review on interventions to change culture and climate, and believe me, it doesn't work, and it's very difficult to change it. So we need to continue, and maybe after 30 years, we will be back again with more new information, new data, and I do hope that we will carry the work, enthusiasm, and the legendary work of Drummond Rennie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. We have time for questions. Please.
Catherine Phillips, Professor of Health Economics and Editor-in-Chief, Health Affairs Scholar. let's go back to the beginning with Drummond Rennie. I had the pleasure of knowing Drummond 30 years ago at UCSF. And what a person. But I had no idea what he was doing in this research on peer review. I was a professor. I was not interested at all. 30 years later, I've realized how important the work you're doing is, how important the work the people in this room are doing is. But I think it needs to be better recognized. We need it more than ever. We need the evidence base. But how do we get researchers to want to build that evidence base? Because you need grants, you need articles, you need motivation, you need incentives. How do we bring up the next generation to do this kind of work?
Yeah, maybe we can talk about the World Conference of Research Integrity about that, because there is research. And for example, in Europe, yeah, it's coming next year in Vancouver. In Europe, at least I can say that there are many research grants, and then they invest a lot of money in studying research integrity, which publication integrity is a part of. And this is what we're discussing. And there are many initiatives like NERC, which is a network for training about research integrity. So I think that there are positive developments, but we have to continue, and I think we have to keep this enthusiasm of Drummond alive and, well.
Any other questions, please? You can come to the microphone and
Hi, Iona Crista, Italy. Great presentation. I wanted to ask you about something you have not covered, and I was wondering about your position on this ghostwriting, or what they're known now, professional medical writers. So has the position of the scientific community changed? Because I noticed there's less research into that, yet we have entire papers basically written by these professional medical writers who are not acknowledged as authors, who are in the disclosures, and who basically do the bulk of the paper. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of an old problem that hasn't been solved, but I think it's important, and there have been guidance from both the writing medical writers community and from the publishers community about recognizing this, because sometimes medical writers do not want to be an authors because they say we didn't contribute intellectually to research. They did the writing. So I think, again, like with any authorship, I think it has to be a part of a protocol, especially for medical writers. It has to be seen at the beginning of a research, what's going to happen later, and have it in the open. Transparency is best solution and medicine for everything.
Mike, online question.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you, Anna. There's a question from Jose Calvache. Please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, from the Universidad del Cauca in Colombia, asking about corporate authorship. How do you provide accountability for hundreds of collaborators in a big cohort worldwide study?
Yeah, so this is group authorship. So there are, I already presented some solution, which is having a ORCID for the group, link it with individuals, declare contributions of individual authors, and then link everything to the DOI of the publication. So this is a reality, but again, there are many problems with the group or corporate authorship, and also, for example, with the citizen science or community research. But again, I think transparency and moving it at the beginning to the beginning of research and not at the end of a study is most important.
Yes, please.
Hi, Jessica Anker from Vanderbilt University and Journal of the American Medical Informatics Association. Anna, I'm so glad that you're doing all of this work on authorship and identifying these issues. I think, a challenge that we're facing is that often what you're finding is the symptom of the structural problem of incredibly hierarchical either training environments or research environments, where junior people are dependent on senior people for funding, for recognition, for promotion, for graduation. And so one of your early points was people acknowledging that they had added honorary authors. And I think the problem is that they felt or were directly informed that they had no choice. So I think some of these issues are are just revealing some of the problems in science. And I'm wondering what, at the end of the process of publication, what we can do to drive some of this
Yeah.
improvement at the beginning.
I think it's late to try to solve this thing at the end of the publication process. Again, as I said, it's a question of culture and of climate at the institution and organization. And we have to go back and teach both the senior and junior researchers about that. But again, I think what journals have to do, they have to have these trust markers so that at least we know that person who is submitting is a real person. I think we have come to that problem that we have to solve urgently in relation to paper mills, which I'm sure we're going to hear about during this conference. Thanks.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Christopher Bethke. I'm with the German Medical Association Journal. Thank you, Anna, for your talk. I'm also the devil's advocate. And in this capacity, I'd like to ask you, why shouldn't we be so, or why shouldn't we let go of authorship criteria at all? I mean, the field of human genetics didn't collapse after 1,000 authors in Nature papers, and neither did the field of particle physics. So what is the argument for more accountability or for accountability at all in authorship?
Again, because of the difference between different disciplines in this culture of authorship within them. And until we address that at the place where research is done, I'm not sure that we as editors can solve that.
And
Yeah.
we have one more online comment, or?
Yes, thank you. Gerben Tarit of the University Hospital at Adam and the University of Applied Science there in the Netherlands is asking about hierarchical structures in universities and how to account for fair, transparent authorship given those hierarchies.
Again, as a part of a research protocol at the beginning. That worked for me. I think it should work for everybody. And I think it's up to us as senior researchers to instill that into junior researchers. I think we, as I said, discussing it at the end of publication process is not a solution. We have to move back further on. And maybe funders can say, okay, let's see how you do it. You're not going to give money if you don't have a proper authorship guidance at the university. Or we can do audits for that accreditation, part of accreditation process. So there are many different things, but then we have to push for it. And as I can say, and Lex is here, in Europe, there are strong movements to really implement research integrity, including publication integrity into research performing and research funding organizations.
At the beginning.
At the beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anna.